Welcome to Leadership Reimagined. I'm your host, Cassie Crosby. For this month's conversation, I'm sitting down with Jenny Halstead, CEO of My Breast Cancer Support. In a recent conversation I had with Jenny, she shared that despite her role, she hasn't always felt like a leader. So I asked her to come on today because it's something I hear from leaders frequently, to talk more about that and how she's continued to move forward and lead anyway. So Jenny, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I'm excited for the conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat more about leadership and dive into it's got me really thinking about leadership and myself as a leader since we had that conversation that day.
Yeah, I'm so glad. Why don't we start with your journey just to give people a sense of who you are and where you're coming from? So, how did you get to where you are today?
I started my career, my early career was in corporate. So I worked for Gannett, a very large newspaper company, and then another company, another newspaper company, and then a company owned by the Washington Post and the Chicago Tribune. So I have very corporate background. So a lot of management training in those roles. Learned so much. Like in my 20s, when I look back, I think, gosh, I just love those years. I'm still in, friends with people who I was working with at that time, and we can pick up the phone and just, chit chat about what happened in the Gannett years and that kind of thing. And then I had my son, and then my husband and I opened a business. So I went from a very corporate environment. In fact, I was laid off right as I was pregnant with my son, and then I was out of the workforce for a couple of years. And then we opened our own business here in New Hampshire in 2004. So I came on board as the business manager and was surprised about the skills that I'd learned at the corporate level and the training I had there. There were so many things foundationally and fundamentally that I was able to use for running our own business, which we did for 21 years. Overlapping that, I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2010. I knew about my breast cancer support because our business, this universal intervention I feel like running through my life. We done some donations to my breast cancer support. And then I was diagnosed in 2010. So I knew about the organization and did their 5K in that year I was in treatment, and then did a fundraiser through our business, which was very successful, and then joined the board in 2012. And then we were at one of our events, and the person who was the program administrator for my breast cancer support at the time was retiring. And so I was like, oh, tell me more. And it was 2 days a week. And I said, I can do that. I can do that as well as run my own business and raise my son. I can do it. So I did it for 2 days a week. And then in 2014, the founder of our organization, Wendy McCool, decided that she wanted to step down. And so we switched roles. So I took on the executive director role again, as well as running our business, and also running and raising our son, and stepped into the executive director role in 2014. I've been in this role since then. So yeah, it's been a long and winding road, really, I think.
Yeah, so your leadership has really spanned multiple different sort of environments, corporate, your own
Yes,
business, nonprofit,
yes,
kind of run the
yes.
gamut.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's common threads that go through all of those different types of running those different types of businesses in different roles, but many, many overlaps and commonalities, if that's a word. Commonalities is what that word?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
through those things as well, and kind of parsing out the things that, oh yeah, that applies, or how you've, as a professional and kind of a human being over that course of time, have evolved to be the leader I am now. Even seeing myself as a leader kind of feels like a little bit, but how the leader I am now is obviously not the leader I was at 30 or at
Mhm.
35 or 40, even probably. I've evolved in my thinking, in myself. So there's no possible way I could be the same leader that I was then.
Yeah. So before we kind of dig in and unpack
Mhm.
a little bit this feeling of haven't always been a leader, I want to establish a baseline. How do you think about leadership in the work you do today?
I always go back to whenever I'm in a place of not, wondering like, well, how do I respond to this? Or how should I feel about this? Working in nonprofit worlds, you're working a lot with a board who are volunteers. So getting work done through others is very different than when you have a paid employee who is accountable and this is their job and you have to, KPIs and metrics you need to. With a board, it's more on kind of like your influence or their passion, their commitment. So I always come back to leading with love, right? And I think that people, we're all human beings. So I feel like if you're taking someone down to the basic foundational level of who they are, when someone walks into their workplace, I see them that they're showing up as their highest self. I try to anyway. And so when you look at a person, whether it's an employee or anyone really, and you look at it through that lens, it kind of shifts your way of seeing their, maybe it's bad performance, maybe it's a snarky email, maybe it's they didn't do something they were supposed to, or maybe something's really great. It's something really great. At the basic level, they're presenting themselves at their highest self. So I want to try to see people there. And if I get stuck, I come back to, and I'm like, I'm getting all teenagery about it and like, like that. I just come back to lead with love. Always assume the best intent. Because most of the time, that's what people are doing. They're showing up to the highest self in that moment. That doesn't mean they're always like on 100%, but they're in that moment, they're giving what they have during that time.
Mhm.
And that's really stood me in good stead in terms of being a manager, all aspects of life, really. Working with patients through my breast cancer support, personal relationships, professional relationships, kind of having that little bit of a shift of this and having this lens of like, yeah, this is what they have at this moment.
Yeah. And where do
Yeah.
you think that comes from for you?
So many things. I think life experience, time, time served if you want. You can't necessarily have that lens when you're 25
Yeah.
and you haven't had the life experiences, when you've had humbling experiences. We all, have those. If you haven't by the time you're my age, then it's like, what have you been doing? You should have had things. The obstacle is the way, like that book, right?
Yeah.
So if you haven't had those, like you've been dodging and weaving a little bit too much. And I think though, incorporating those into, and again, folding those into yourself as a human being, like not separating your humanness from being the leader, not always having to know the answer, but being my style is really, I feel like more of a mentoring role, more of a lead from the back. I'm more comfortable there than, and we're in a small organization, although I've worked, in teams of 15, 20, where I've had direct reports. And I've always felt that I want to be in the trenches. I want to be in it, like in solidarity. I think
Mhm.
people when they come to you, even as an employee, they want solidarity. They might want compassion and they might want empathy. And those are really important. One obviously is more action oriented in the compassion sense, but they really want solidarity. They want to like, yeah, I feel you. I got you. Let's figure this out together. And I think that the experiences I've had personally, where the hardest days, the darkest hours with my son, with my father's death, other deaths that I've had up close and personal with me, where I've been in the room during the death.
Yeah.
It's just like, again, just kind of like is like that taking your breath away of the edges of humanity, like
Yeah.
again, I keep going back to this being human, but we can't do anything but that's who we are. We're humans.
Yeah. Right.
So I think I don't know if that answered your question, did it? I think it did. Hopefully it did.
Yes. Yeah.
How I got here. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think there, and of course my own breast cancer experience. When I was diagnosed, it was out of the blue. I didn't have any family history, only distant. There was no genetic component. I'd gone for mammograms. I was 44 at the time. My son was 8. So it was terrifying. It was very scary. And I had all the things. I had good health insurance and support system and people who could drive me. And my sister came from the England to help. And I had all the things. And even still, it was terrifying. It was terrifying. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
imagine. Well, and also it's not lost on me that like when you went through this experience, as you explain it, you had this great support system, but the work you do today is really providing that for people who don't have that, if I am
Yeah.
tracking
And I think
correctly.
that that's probably what drew me to it. Some women have, excuse me, women have when they go through breast cancer, they kind of have sorry, I've got a call. they have a they either want to kind of get into a situation where they want to give back, or they just want to say, sorry, I'm gonna
You want to take a
like
minute,
a little
drop some
tickle. I'm
water?
sorry.
Yeah. Take your time and then we
Sorry.
can, you're good.
I'm good. I got a cough drop in here.
That's what editing is for.
That's what editing is for. Exactly. I got a cough drop here. I'm gonna get it. So women they want to go, I think, when they go through their journey, some people just want to be over. They want to go back to my regular life. I want to pretend like it didn't happen. Or they have something where they want to give back. So we come in a various stages there of their journey, and we go with wherever they are is where we meet them. And it could be from they were diagnosed yesterday to I'm having a reoccurrence. I went through this 30 years ago and I'm now having a reoccurrence, and
Yeah.
I'm struggling. So I think I didn't have an appreciation for what I had until I knew what it was like not to have it. And it's certainly in my first role with my breast cancer support, where I was talking to patients every day, there was a healing for me too. There was a healing that telling my story again when appropriate. And also on the other end of the phone, the person, when I might say, yeah, I remember that when I went through Reimagine, oh, you were a survivor. It's a different level of conversation than someone who hasn't had, not that not that it can't be a meaningful conversation if you haven't gone through it, but there's just kind of like that kinship, that invisible thread that's like thrown
Yeah.
out, that just like connects in a way that maybe wouldn't otherwise. And again, getting back to the humanness of all of us.
Right. You mentioned solidarity, and I suppose that just increases that connection. The fact that you have your own experience and that you can relate from a firsthand perspective rather than as an outside observer.
Mm. And just, I think, you know, letting people know that they're not alone, letting them know that I kind of call it this person. I guess I'm more inclined to call it like the home alone theory, that
Yeah.
you might be in a home alone, but if there's someone else in the house, even if you're not in the same room, then you have that general sense of that someone else is there. And that's what we want to show up for people. And they may never call us after that first conversation when they get our new patient bag, when they're first diagnosed with their nurse navigator. There's always that I can go back to that, or I can go to that person, that organization if I need help. And I think that's so powerful for people that, it's kind of as we get older, and I think of myself as a mother, as my son gets older, it's like as he doesn't need me day to day. Now he's
Yeah.
in his 20s, but knowing that I'm there, I feel hopefully it provides him a safety that can't be underestimated. And I might not hear from him for weeks. But
Right.
it's like the same thing. It's like
Yeah.
being in a house alone but someone else is home.
Yeah, it's like as your kids get older, it's like they might not need you or come to you all the time, but they want to know that when they pick up that phone and call you or they call your name, that you're going to
Yeah.
be there, right? And the same
Yeah.
thing sounds like for your organization, people know that there's this support system behind them and they need it.
Yeah. And I think, somewhere in your brain kind of files that away, somewhere in that kind of like that Stone Age survival part of your
Yeah.
brain. I forget which part of it is. And it just kind of like files it. Oh yeah, I'm not alone. There's somebody out there who understands where I am, where I might be going, and I don't know. I'm not okay right now. And again, that's the message we try to impart to people, that right now you're probably not feeling like you're okay, but you will not always feel the way you do right now. So knowing that at some point along the way you will feel okay is really critical. And I think that's true again for parents, for
Yeah.
humans, that you're gonna, like, oh geez, I'm feeling really low. So being in this discomfort with patients is part of the work. And also knowing that you won't always feel the way you do right now, because what we can count on is that something will change along the way. So that's, again, I think there's such a yin and a yang with it. It's walking alongside these women, and not throughout their journey. We might have one conversation with them, but being alongside in this discomfort helps personally when you're in discomfort as well.
Yeah.
So there's so many parallels with working in a nonprofit that I found. I mean, not that I worked in corporate and, it was all about profits, and but there was still a purpose. There was still a collective purpose. There's still a mission, if you want, under a different guise,
Sure.
in the corporate world, and the same with a small business.
Yeah. Well, and some of it comes down to where you put the weight, right? So if
Mm,
you're corporate world, like profit takes huge precedence over purpose. And then if you're in a nonprofit, purpose is really at the forefront of everything you do, although you can't do what you do without that revenue.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a dance. Within the nonprofit world, it is very different. As I said before, working with the mostly volunteers
Mm.
is a different has a different scope than working with paid employees for sure. And then, yeah, the mission, obviously mission first, sustainability second,
Yeah.
administration third. That's kind of like the three things, the three pillars that I see a the nonprofit world. And when we are kind of, wavering or just like, oh, we're a bit just, referring back to okay, what's our mission? We can't be all things to all people. We have to
Yeah.
stay the course. And when we've looked at, oh, okay, well, fundraising's been going really well, so maybe we should go a bit broader or a bit, we've come
Yeah.
back to, okay, let's do what we do really well. There's still women out there who don't know who we are, who do need help. How do we do what we do better? Is always at the forefront. But certainly fundraising is a huge aspect. We couldn't do sustainability is obviously not above mission, but it's a very close second. It's a
Yeah.
very close for two reasons. Number one, you can't fund your mission. You got to fund your mission. Number two, you want breast in our worlds, breast cancer is not going to go away in my lifetime anyway. We'd love it to. So holding that responsibility of like, this needs to continue beyond when I'm not here or when our board is moved on, and people who have maybe not as much passion but are committed to the organization. There needs to be those financial things in place so it's sustainable over time.
Yeah. Yeah. And something that I did want to ask you about while I had you here and, we have this audience is about one of the first times that I met you, I heard you speak. And it was just so shocking to me when, I heard you ask, like, how many women in this room know somebody who have been affected in some way? And I think almost every hand in the room of like probably 40 plus people went up.
Yeah.
And then what shocked me more was when you asked how many people have personally been affected and if they were willing to share, have had breast cancer themselves.
Yeah.
And it just tore my heart open to see how many women's hands remained up. And and to hear you talk about, and that time we were in the state of New Hampshire, how, breast cancer being the second leading cause of death for women in that state. And I don't
Mhm.
know where it is right now, maybe back into the first position, but just it's so striking to me how prevalent it is and how many women are impacted by breast cancer.
Yeah, I mean, New Hampshire still, we just looked at the stats. It's is number 5 in the nation at the moment
Mm.
for instances. And statistically, women have a 1 in 8 chance of being diagnosed, and a woman dies every 13 minutes from breast cancer. So it is it does affect so many people. Like as you said, I'd be hard pressed to come across somebody in my personal or professional life who hasn't been affected by breast cancer, whether it's personally, whether it's an aunt,
Yeah.
sister, neighbor, friend.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it affects a whole community, it affects a whole community. It takes, I mean, the adage takes a village is so true that many times the matriarch of is the person holding the pieces of the family together. And none of the things that go on in people's lives, you still got to take your kid to soccer, your husband still gets sick, your parents are still aging. And then you also have
Yeah.
this breast cancer diagnosis to work with on a day-to-day basis and manage treatment plans and all of these things. It's overwhelmingly difficult to prioritize all those things. And in addition, you're also managing other people's sadness and
Right.
fear about it. I
Right.
remember when I was diagnosed, and I was telling my mother-in-law, and we were at it was Easter, and I said, I have breast cancer, and all she did was close her eyes and just a tear rolled down her face. Like it chokes me up again, even saying, and this was 16
Yeah.
years ago. It was just that something from me would cause this level of sadness in her,
Yeah.
um, was like took my breath away. So I wanted to comfort her. Like, it's okay, I'm gonna be fine.
Yeah.
And this is what happens. People don't know what to say. They don't know how to be around a person who has got this diagnosis. And especially if
Mm.
someone has a terminal diagnosis. I've got a couple of people in my life at the moment who have metastatic disease where
Yeah.
treatable, not curable. And just the rich conversations is just their whole lens has changed. And also of course, a fear of not being alive anymore, not being around, and having small children and families to manage, and all the things that go with the terminal disease.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for something that is so personal, I can't help but wonder. Right. And I work in the nonprofit space myself. I'm on a couple of boards, and something that we continuously talk about and, are challenged by is really determining when you have so much need, right? And you mentioned it earlier, how to prioritize those resources
Yeah.
and who to help. And I imagine when it's so personal, for you especially, it has to be difficult to make some of those decisions. But how do you work through that?
We have been really fortunate that we have been able to fund all the grants of the applications we've received over the course of time, but that we have put a couple of things in place that enable us to do that. And our system is a little bit different. We don't take applications directly. If someone Googles breast cancer in New Hampshire, for example, and ours comes up, we direct them back to their nurse navigator so that they can obviously they're all kind of our gatekeeper that the person has a financial need, that they actually are in breast cancer treatment, they're in active treatment. And then a few years ago, we were able to fund what we called a Pink Angel Fund, which was those circumstances where the need was greater than our typical grant schedule that are in our bylaws. So we were able to go outside the lines. But I will say I do have I'm not sure how to term it. I call it a long and winding road. I feel that if people find their way to us within our, our catchment area, then we will fund the grant for them to the extent that we can. I think there's just a level of whether you want to call it karmic, whether you want to call it
Mm.
whatever it is, that if they find their way to us, then we will find a way to help them in some way. It may be
Wow.
not as much of a grant as we typically do, or we may only be able to do a partial or at the very least, we direct them to other resources within our area. And that's a big focus of ours for this year is being more patient focused. So being in the worlds we're in, aggregating all of these resources and wisdom from our nurse navigators and social workers so that patients have a place to go to, that they can access other financial resources, other programs within our area that would be of interest to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I want to shift the conversation a little bit
Sure.
into our main topic. And
Mhm.
so, as I hear you talk about the journey that brought you here and all the different ways that you've found yourself leading over the course of your adult life, whether that's in corporate America, your own business, and now the nonprofit world. But to hear you say, like, after all of that, like, I don't always feel like a leader. I want to understand that a little bit more because this is something I hear quite a bit. So tell me more about that feeling, and what does that really mean to you when you say, "I don't always feel like a leader"?
I guess the first thing that comes into my mind when someone says you're a leader is like, oh, that means I need to have all the answers. I need to know everything. And I just
Okay.
feel like I don't. And there's so many situations where I just think like, I don't know. So it is a difficult notion to entertain, I suppose. But as I said, I have been thinking more about it. And I am the leader of this organization. I have been and shaped the direction of the organization for, since I've been in this role. And I think I just have that kind of, as I said before, kind of a lead from the back perspective where,
Mm.
again, standing in solidarity with people who are doing the work, although I'm also doing the work, I'm not doing anything probably that any of the people who work with me are not doing. And I feel like that keeps me grounded. I like to still do some of the data entry things because when I'm inputting stuff into QuickBooks, I feel like the numbers flow over me and that tells our story. So that keeps me grounded in okay, our mission, like why are we here? What are we doing? And again, referring back to that. But I guess I haven't kind of stood back, I guess, or got flown up to 20,000 feet and kind of done like a 360 of myself and said, okay, yeah, I guess I am a leader. Yeah, wow. But I definitely do want to be more of a in a mentoring role um than in a instructional role,
Mhm.
in terms of leadership. That's just who I am. That's just who I want to show up for people to be. And if you have the right people, then lifting them up to do and make decisions for themselves is really
Yeah.
where I want to be. That adage of, again, I love to live in analogies and stuff, but the ride, the boat, the tide, about the tide rising, the boat rising with the tide. It just makes it so easy. It makes it so easy to see where people can do things. People who I work with do this part of the aspect of the job really well, where I'm just like, not as that's just not a strength of mine. So hiring people who complement your style and your abilities just makes it so much easier. There's so many times when I just think like, wow, I get to my colleague and I will say, wow, I can't believe we get to do this. Like we get to like
Yeah.
make a real difference. We get to have someone not lose their house because of the work we do. And having that, again, I go back to that solidarity, that humanness of being in this privileged situation to work with people where you can see that type of impact in their lives and making a difference. But yeah, I feel I get, again, I get the sense of, leader. I forget who it was. Some person, I think it might have been Nelson Mandela, who like was a lead from the back,
Mm.
versus from the front, where like, you're not a look at me, it's just a different style, but you're kind of like supporting that team and then pushing them forward, versus
Mm.
not pushing, but just like guiding them, or you're
Yeah.
walking so that then they're walking,
Yeah.
versus again being in that more of instructional, this is what we're going to do, like, or having them like, well, what should we do, in a
Yeah.
more of a conversational role. And again, we're in a small organization, so we can do that. And I love that about the being in a leadership role where it's a small, because you can be so nimble. When you're in corporate America, it's more difficult to be that nimble in terms of changing
Oh,
things.
yeah.
But again, small things to human beings can change the whole culture and the whole essence, if you want, of a
Yeah.
role and a department.
Yeah, almost like if talking about the tide rising all ships, it's like trying
Yes.
to turn a sailboat versus a cruise ship,
Mm.
right? It's
Yes.
like just
Yes.
different orders of magnitude,
Yeah.
in terms of timing and speed.
Exactly. Yeah. And
Yeah.
again, I feel like these fundamental things that we're talking about, leadership, are so scalable. Again, if we go back to the root level of being a human being coming into a leadership role, that's whether you're managing 1,000, or maybe not 1,000, that's a lot, maybe like 50 people or two people. There's elements that are just, they're so scalable if you're able to look through people look at people through a human lens, of
Mhm.
a human lens first.
Yeah, and it's so interesting that like the story that you've created around leadership is that, right, leaders have to have all the answers, and it's interesting because it's one of the things I work with people to overcome is the
Mm,
need to have all the answers,
yeah.
because as the environment is as complex as it is today, as interconnected things are, as little information as we have to often to make decisions, like
Hmm.
we can't have all the answers.
Hmm.
And like if you always have the answers, how are you empowering other people?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there's something in there though. It sounds like intuition is really an important part of how you lead.
Yeah, again, I think so. I think you can do all the leadership training courses you want. And I did those when I was a manager at Gannett, and they were amazing. I learned so much. I learned so much. But at the end of the day, if that's not who you are, if you're not leading through who you are, then you're always putting on a performance. And who wants to do
Mhm.
that every day? You
Yeah.
want to kind of walk through the door, obviously within a professional role, as who you are, not as somebody who you've been trained to be, or who
Yeah.
you're forcing yourself to be. And I think that's where a disconnect comes, and that's where, somewhat of dysfunction comes, when someone's just not being authentically who they are in a role. They're just doing what they think they should do.
Yeah. Well, and the reality is that like something that I learned in my career in the army is like, the real you will come out when you're cold, tired, hungry, wet,
Yes.
all those
Yes.
uncomfortable things. And so
Yeah.
you can pretend to be someone else, but when the stakes are the highest and it matters the
Yeah.
most, who you are is going to be revealed.
Yes.
That
Yeah.
your character will come through.
Yeah. And that's just that's again, that's human nature. That's just what's going to
Mhm.
happen whether you want it to or not. Of course, in any role, especially in a corporate, but that's those times there are going to be those confrontations in board meetings, or they're going to be those what should we going to do about this donor? We actually made a mistake, what any along the way, and how that kind of who you are at the knee-jerk level is going to show up.
Mhm.
So that's yeah, as you said, that's coming out whether you want it or not.
Yeah. And, as I hear you just unpack this idea that you haven't always felt like a leader and things like that and how it's impacted you, it's clear to me just from knowing you in the community and seeing the work you do that one, that thought really hasn't held you back in the impact that you've made and that your organization continues to do incredible things all around the community. So I'm curious, even though you sometimes have this feeling or maybe you're uncomfortable or unsure, how do you continue to move forward?
Yeah, I mean, and I think when I think of it in terms of like if someone, as you did, said, "Well, you are a leader," and I've thought, "Ooh, no," it doesn't occur to me that I don't need to be a leader. I
Mhm.
just am a leader, or I show up again the way I show up, and so it's kind of to me, it's like it's a title, it's a word or it's description or a label someone might put on me, but it doesn't matter. Leader or no leader, I have work to do, and I will get that. I have purpose, and I what do we need to do now? And like most, I think where it comes in most is like there's always more to do. Like it's difficult to have to draw a line under it when there's still so much more work to do. So I don't think it's held me back. It hasn't occurred to me. I will say it's like, oh, I just am. Oh, okay. And I think if it did occur to me more, maybe I would be like, ooh. But it's just like we got to get the work done. The mission is here.
Yeah.
We need to just onward.
Yeah. Well, and when the work again is so personal, like how do you maintain your boundaries and how do you make sure that you're not like overcommitting or overdoing like some people who work in some of the social services and nonprofits, right? I hear stories all the time of people sort of getting over involved or too
Mm.
close to the work, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. So how do you prevent yourself from really just overdoing and burning out?
I think uh, again, it's changed along the way. When I was, as I think I mentioned before, as I was going through my own healing journey, which is lifelong after a
Yeah.
diagnosis. But again, I'm 16 years out from my diagnosis, and when I was having more conversations with patients, I was new, I was fresh in survivorship. So that was part of my healing journey, is that to talk about my story and realize that it was just kind of my own whole system processing that. But we do have to be mindful. The person who is our program administrator now is also a survivor and newly 5 years out of survivorship. So we have to, what I say is kind of put our money where our mouth is and say, you know
Mhm.
what, we need to have programs in place that
Yeah.
that promote wellness within those people. And we do make space in our meetings to talk about that and say, are you okay? Or if you're feeling uncomfortable, then you can just send this application over to me or to my colleague and we'll handle it. So again, it's
Yeah.
just saying that out loud, saying your own threshold, and the person who is in that role, she's also has a full-time job. She does this kind of part-time, and she's truly an amazing human. But we reiterate that conversation, like, okay, if you're not well or not feeling great, then please send that over to us. And then that's what we tell our patients, like, know where the lines are, know where to
Yeah.
come back. So we have to inherently in what we do, we have to also within our own organization make sure that we're doing the things that we're saying, telling patients, or recommending patients doing. Myself personally, it is a struggle because I work from home. It's like, oh, let me just go in and check my email. So
Right.
I mean, it's just having, again, it's anyone who works from home that I would think that's the case. But it's simply just saying it's, Friday, I'm done. Or sometimes it's, Wednesday afternoon. It's just like
Yeah.
I need to walk away. I'm feeling I'm not getting anything done. I'm feeling
Yeah.
like uncomfortable and antsy. Like, what does that mean? Like, why am I feeling this way? This isn't what I typically feel like on a Wednesday afternoon. And just walking away.
Yeah.
Again, within a small organization, we can do that. And also giving people the time, you manage your own time. You know what needs to get done, having a flexible work schedule, and having that, being able to have them manage their own work-life balance. Again, it just makes for so much more productive work environment.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like making the space for people who are maybe doing this work as you are, who have personal
Yes.
attachments to it, acknowledging how difficult it can be at times, and just making that space and that permission structure for them to like ask for help if they need it.
Yes, ask
So,
for help or just step away, to be able to
yeah.
step away. Our work is important, but we do say there's not a patient with their brain exposed on the table. This is important work we do, but we're not there is a space that we can put in there for ourselves, and who we can show up to be for that patient in that conversation will be impacted by how we're feeling at that time. So
Mm.
we need to just, again, I keep going back to it, but recognizing the humanness in us,
Yes.
that is
Yeah.
just, there's an ebb and a flow, and there's not even a good day and a bad day. It's just like, what's the thing under the thing? Like, I'm coming to my computer and I'm just like, what's the thing under the thing? It's not my computer. It's not how many emails I got. It's not the board member who just
Yeah.
emailed me a question that doesn't make sense or whatever. The thing under the thing is what I need to address and say, well, what is that about? Do I need to step away? Do I need to
Yeah.
finish a task that I didn't finish? Do I need to have the conversation I have been putting off? What is
Mm.
that, again, that thing under the thing? Uh,
Yeah.
Addressing that as the person who sets the tone, right? As
Mm.
when we have a board meeting once a month, if I'm going in like, "Ugh," even though if they've had my ED report for a couple of days, you are going to set the tone for what's happening and what's going on in that organization. There's an inherent responsibility and a heaviness and a weight in that as the executive director you carry. Um,
Yeah.
so being mindful of what do I need to do to be my true highest self at those times
Yeah.
is
There's
important.
just such a sense of you tuning into yourself, right?
Mm-mm.
Which is really, I think, to be really effective as a leader is to understand, to your point, what you're experiencing, how you're feeling, how that's going to impact how you're showing up, your presence, what you can provide to people, that, what you can achieve that day, and just
Mm.
tuning in to right to that intuition and to knowing what you need. And I think
Yes.
sometimes when you step away, you get more done than if you sat in front of your computer for the rest of the afternoon.
Yeah, definitely. You get some clarity on things, and I think
Mm.
encouraging that type of empowerment in other people,
Mm.
like, okay, well, what do you think we should do? Or, well, what's your gut saying?
Yeah.
What's your gut say to you? Or, I'm fine with whatever you decide, on decisions that, what, I don't have to make every single decision. She
Yeah.
might come, Tina might come to me and say, hey, well, what do you think about this? And I'll say, what do you think? Or you can decide. It's okay, whatever I trust your judgment. I trust your judgment. And I think saying that, it creates this environment, this relationship where, I can raise like an eyebrow in a Zoom meeting and she'll say to me afterwards, what was going on? Like, you okay? Because we just so in sync with those
Yeah.
micro expressions of how we do things that it's like I don't want to say a dance, but kind of, we're working in this lockstep of running the organization and getting the work done. But tuning in as a leader, manager, mentor, tuning into people's why they're there, what's going on in their lives, kind of keeping all those pieces, holding them all together and being like, okay, you know what? Why don't you take tomorrow and do what you want? Or can I, of course, if you're, the answer is yes. The answer is yes. If you're sick, coming to me saying, oh, can I take? Yes, you can. Yes, you can. And again, that's not always possible, but for the most part, it is. If
Yeah.
someone is getting to the point where they're asking you, can I take time or do this? Of course you can. Of course you
Yeah.
can. Because they're inherently going to know more of what they need than I will. And again, that's going to translate into them being more productive in the work environment. And I think, again, that sends a message to say, tune into you and I'll do the same and we'll be
Yeah.
in this environment together where we'll create an inherent foundation of trust that even if we do, something doesn't go as planned, then it's like, it's all good. It's okay. Again, you went in with the best intent. I know you went in with the best intent. I know you came as your highest self, and it's still, and I too will also be like, oh, I forgot to do that, or oh, I thought I did that and I didn't do it. Yeah.
So, for someone listening who might be in a similar place or have those feelings of I've been asked to lead or I'm in a role where people look at me as a leader, but I don't always feel that way, what advice do you have for those people, or what would you say that they should keep in mind?
I would say, again, I would say put aside what you think you should be doing and just do it. I don't think, again, leading from that sense of intuition and wisdom, I will say,
Mm,
is what is going to lead you. It's going to lead you to lead in your most effective and authentic way.
mm,
So I would say put us, if you're like, ooh, that doesn't feel that leader, ooh, just don't, you're like, you know what, I'm not a leader. I'm a mentor. I'm a associate. I'm a coworker. I'm a reimagine your leadership, reimagine that label for yourself into something else. And that feels like, oh yeah, I can get behind that. I can get behind that. Leader feels like too much, or too much pressure, or I should know that.
mm,
Whereas like mentor, yeah, I can get behind mentor. That feels good. That feels like authentic. It feels like, yeah, I can come on, let's walk. That
mm.
kind of thing. And it's just a subtle shift, but could be, yeah, that feels more me. And at the end of the
Yeah.
day, the work is the same. Yeah. So
I love the plug to reimagine leadership. That's what we're doing here, right? That's the goal of
yeah.
this whole
I see I
podcast
wove that
interview.
in. I wove that
Yeah,
in really well,
thank you.
knitted, crocheted that in.
Yes, I
So
love
good.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Jenny, this has been just such an incredible conversation. I'm so
Yeah.
grateful for just so much of the sharing that you did today, your personal journey, how you're helping people, and just what an impact and what an important mission that you have. For people who are interested or want to hear more, where can we find you?
So socials, mybreastcancersupport.com is our website. We're on socials, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. If they want to connect to me personally, I'm on LinkedIn, Jenny Halstead. Connect with us if you're interested in finding more about our work or volunteering or board roles. Yeah. Connect, or if in partnership, if we love to collaborate with other organizations, or
Awesome.
just talk, talk the talk about all things breast cancer, or all things human for that matter. I'm always into that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jenny.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Yeah.